All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the LKY School. In fact, here at the LKY School, yesterday and the day before, we had a very interesting workshop on international studies in India. And I was extremely impressed to see a room filled with luminaries from India who are working in the field of international studies and talking about how to regenerate interest in this and how to take it forward and so on. Extremely insightful. And one of those luminaries was Amitabh Mattu, who's sitting right next to me here today, and he's giving a public lecture on building peace in Kashmir. Amitabh Mattu is currently a professor of international politics at New Delhi's Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he's a member of the National Knowledge Commission, which is a high-level advisory group to the Prime Minister of India. Up until last year, in December, he was the Vice Chancellor of the University of Jammu. He served on the Governing Council of Pugwash and is a director of the India-Afghanistan Foundation. Professor Mattu was, until recently, a member of India's National Security Council's Advisory Board and was also a member of the task force constituted by Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh on global strategic developments. Now, the task force examined various aspects of global trends in strategic affairs and their implications for India. Professor Mattu had his early education in Burnhall School in Srinagar and the Jawaharlal Nehru University. He earned a DPhil in the international relations from the University of Oxford, and has been a visiting professor at Stanford, Notre Dame, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and he has been chairperson of the Center for International Politics, Organization and Disarmament at JNU. Recognizing his contribution to education, the President of India honored him on the occasion of the Republic Day in 2008. So please, will you join me in welcoming Professor Mattu?
Dr. Kenneth Tan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege and an honor to be here at the Lee Kuan Yew School. May I also thank in absentia Dean Kishore Mehbubani for the courtesies that he's extended to us over the last 3 days. I thought what I'll do is speak for about 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and then we can have a discussion, depending on how interested you are in the subject. And one of the reasons I thought, one of the ways to begin this presentation is actually looking at some of the recent news stories on Jammu and Kashmir, or where Kashmir has figured. About a few months ago, I think soon before he took office, President Obama gave an interview to Time Magazine's Joe Klein, where he said that Kashmir was going to be one of the places that his foreign policy administration was going to focus, and that it was likely that he would even appoint President Bill Clinton as a special envoy. That hasn't happened, but Kashmir was in the news for that. Similarly, there's a well-known book, and part of which appeared in an article in Foreign Affairs a few months ago by Ahmed Rashid and Barney Rubin, in which they asked themselves the question, how do you actually stabilize Pakistan? And one of the answers that they gave was that you could actually do so only if somehow you resolved Kashmir. Kashmir is important from a systemic point of view because you see a rivalry between two nuclear-armed states. You see, in some ways, Jammu and Kashmir and that whole region being the center for terrorism, extremism. Bilaterally, India and Pakistan, or Pakistanis more than Indians, see this as evidence of a permanent structural conflict with India. And within India, I think the challenge is how your emergence as a great power can somehow also mean that you resolve your internal problems, including Jammu and Kashmir. This is the kind of peg on which you can really rest any discussion on Kashmir. But my mandate here now is really to look at what are the challenges that you face in Jammu and Kashmir, what are the ways by which you can move forward and have already moved forward. And I shall do this over the next 25 minutes. So the objectives of the presentation is really focused on the complexity of the challenges, ways to move forward, and it's not going to be a history of India, Pakistan, or the Kashmir conflict. I think most of you know it, and it can easily be accessed on the net or through several books that exist on the subject. So it's not going to look back and talk about the United Nations resolutions or whether the accession of Jammu and Kashmir to India was complete or not, but really on, conceptually speaking, on the complexity of challenges that exist and ways in which we can address those challenges. Sorry. What are the challenges? The challenges in J&K are not dissimilar to the challenges that many conflict regions face around the world. It's a center for multiple conflicts and violence, and I'll explain all these. It's got weak institutions. It's been characterized by poor governance. There's social and educational backwardness. And there's continuing extremist tendencies, even while there are polarization along regional, religious, ethnic lines. And its economy is completely parasitical. And who is to blame, as I said? I'm not going to talk about who is to blame, but if we were to capsule the multiple causes in the most reductionist sense, it would be Pakistan's self-negating policies, Kashmir's poor leadership, and of course also Government of India's multiple failures. And when we talk about multiple conflicts, often it's, and even in the most sophisticated of journals or academic writings, Kashmir is really presented as a center of as I said, the new studies talk about it as only in terms of India-Pakistan terms. But the multiplicity of conflicts that exist, the New Delhi-Islamabad axis is only one part of the complexity of conflicts. There is, in the valley, a latent conflict between Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims. I'm a Kashmiri Pandit, but there are very few left in the valley. Most of them have had to leave because of the militancy and violence that Jammu and Kashmir was gripped with for over 20 years. Jammu Kashmir is more than just a valley. It's got Jammu, which is predominantly Hindu. The valley is predominantly Muslim, and Leh, which is predominantly Buddhist. Or not predominantly, but it has a majority Buddhist population. So you have tensions between Jammu and Kashmir. You have tensions between Ladakh, the capital of which is Leh, and Jammu. You have a tension between Leh and Kashmir. And of course, there is severe tension between New Delhi and Kashmir, and increasingly between New Delhi and Jammu and New Delhi and Ladakh, as was evidenced by the severe tensions that the state experienced, especially Jammu, and Ladakh has done so periodically over the last 10, 15 years. And finally, of course, there is the India-Pakistan, the New Delhi-Islamabad tension, which has, as you know, resulted in a cycle of violence, terrorism, refugees, civilian casualties, leading to further alienation, regional and religious polarization, and leading to violence and terrorism again. So this vicious cycle has really existed over the last 20, 22 years. When we talk about weak institutions, just to expand on the bullet points, you have local bodies which are really stunted. Grassroots institutions of governance are not strong enough. The civil society is still weak. Educational institutions remain substandard. And other democratic institutions are still not strong. Poor governance. It's the second most corrupt state in India. The public delivery systems have been inadequate, and there's a gradual lack of faith in the system. Again, in terms of education and social backwardness, low literacy levels, much less than national Indian average, high educated unemployment, and low on the Human Development Index. In terms of growing extremism, Jammu and Kashmir was known for its Sufi Islam. In fact, it's the only school of Sufi Islam which is organic, indigenous. All other schools of Sufi Islam which came to India came from either Turkey, Central Asia, or most particularly Afghanistan. Fortunately, we keep forgetting that Afghanistan was the center of most important Sufi faiths, including Khaja Muhyiddin Chishti, the Chishti order, and several other orders. But even while the Sufi Islam might have been eroded, there is also growing hardline sentiment within the Hindus of Jammu and the Buddhists of Ladakh. And what you have is also that militancy and terrorism are still alive. There's a report which said that the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which was behind the Mumbai blasts, terrorist blasts, have managed to infiltrate into the valley over the last few days. On top of it, if this was not enough, you have a parasite economy. The government cannot even raise revenues enough to pay for its employees. The tourist economy, which was the backbone of the economy, has been drastically hit by violence. You have poor infrastructure, and obviously little room for private investment given the circumstances under which J&K is today. Now, under these circumstances, is there really sign for hope, given all these problems that exist in terms of the politics, in terms of the economy, in terms of the society? Fortunately, and Dr. Sanjay Baru is sitting here, who used to be media advisor to the Prime Minister. Fortunately, over the last 5 years, there has been, and frankly speaking, over the last 6-7 years, and more particularly so over the last 5 years, there's growing awareness within the Government of India of the need to address many of the problems that affect Jammu and Kashmir in their entirety through a more visionary approach than we have seen over the last 62 years. First of all, you've had the most credible, inclusive, democratic elections in Jammu and Kashmir, arguably in the history of Jammu and Kashmir. You have had over 67% of people voting. Outside one district or one administrative unit in the Kashmir Valley, more than 50% voted. The fact of terrorism and continuing violence, an overwhelming sentiment against violence within Kashmir. And increasingly a growing sentiment for the return of the Kashmiri Hindus and for Kashmiriyat, which is really, and I can explain these terms in the discussion, which is really a little telegraphic word for Sufi Islam, where all the kind of syncretic tendencies that exist in Kashmir have existed in Kashmir. Kashmiriyat is the name given to that little